welcome to Leading the Way for You, a webinar series hosted by Country Meadows Retirement Communities and our sister company, Ecumenical Retirement Community. In this series, we will be posting webinars featuring our senior care experts, sharing information on topics that interest you. My name is Kelly Kuntz, and I'm coming to you from one of our apartments at our retirement community. Today, we will be joined by Maureen Sirianni, a certified validation method teacher and memory care community outreach specialist for Country Meadows. Maureen will help you to recognize signs of decline in your loved one, as well as notice when it might be time to seek safe and supportive care for that loved one. Every single day, Maureen supports our residents with Alzheimer's disease and dementia, and she serves as a resource for their family members as well as members of the general community. She tells me that while we know what's right for our loved ones in our head, our heart often sends us different messages. So without further ado, it is my honor to introduce Maureen Sirianni.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an important topic, acknowledging signs of decline in a loved one and really knowing when and how to seek the safe supportive care, but also, like you had mentioned, Kelly, that head and heart disconnect sometimes can play some tricks on us. And so I wanted to take the opportunity today to really kind of discuss some of the things that the viewers might be feeling. Again, when we talk about this head-heart disconnect, I would like to start just briefly by talking about, what's going on in our heads. When you're caring for a loved one, you never really planned for challenges to kind of come up. And sometimes they sneak up on us, especially with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. And so oftentimes in our head, we hear ourselves saying, did I just see that? Did that just really happen? Am I seeing what you're seeing? And family members start to compare notes. And then, before long, you have 4 different opinions, all seeing something different. The one key component is that everyone loves the person with dementia, but everyone views their relationship and views decline differently. And so that can kind of cause a disconnect with families. A lot of times families will say to me, we're not really equipped to take care of this or to handle this. We thought we were doing all the right things. And then sometimes judgment comes into play with family members. And like I said, the concern is definitely for the loved one. And so the head plays a big role in what's going on with how to support a loved one. A couple other things that I always kind of want to touch base about is a lot of times I'll hear family members say, we always promised we wouldn't put our loved one away. And when I hear that, it makes me think back to long-term care facilities of the 70s or even the 80s where elder care was viewed differently and it looked different. And so I'd like to kind of dispel that myth also about what senior living looks like today and just how vibrant and different it is from, those days of the past. And then also too, I'd like to kind of take a look at the heart because again, sometimes when we view senior care with our heart, sometimes there is a disconnect with the head and the heart because we recognize that our loved one is slowing down. And so we begin to grieve that. And, that causes us to have an emotional struggle. Should I do more? Could I do more? How come everybody else in the family isn't doing more? Even to the point where the heart can even trick us, where we think, oh, I didn't see that. My loved one's getting better, or they're perking back up. This was just a, blip on the screen. And so denial can start to kind of eke its way into not just the head, but also in with the heart. And then a lot of times, even when senior care is considered as an option, that heart does start to break a little bit because families think, well, what happens to my role? How do I maintain the relationship, whether it be a spouse or an adult child or a sibling, because they're afraid that, a facility will kind of take over and their role is lost. And so there's definite grief to that head and heart disconnect. So I think it's important that the viewers that are here watching this webinar kind of allow themselves to acknowledge those feelings that they might have and recognize that it's not wrong to feel that way. But hopefully the webinar will help people navigate the space they find themselves living in right now. When we talk about recognizing the physical and the cognitive decline in a loved one, I wanted to share some bullet points with you of my experience of working in senior care for as long as I have. Families have brought these concerns to my attention, and so I wanted to share them so that the viewers recognize that what they're dealing with is actually quite normal to what everyone else is experiencing as well. So when we look at physical decline, a lot of times you'll notice that a loved one might have some challenges with dressing or with bathing or with grooming. And I'll hear adult daughters or even sons or spouses say, man, I couldn't get her to change her clothes. She's been wearing those clothes for weeks. And, that's definitely a red flag that we've got some challenges. And then when you look at the physical challenge of my loved one won't change their clothes, or they're refusing to shower or bathe or groom themselves, we have to help family members understand that the physical challenges that they see their loved one facing oftentimes have a connection to the cognitive challenges that they are experiencing. And so when somebody gets stuck in that rut where they don't want to change their clothes, oftentimes when you look at the cognitive challenge that that person is facing, you recognize that they've lost that conceptual ability to line up what needs to be done in order for me to change my clothes. And so they push that off to the side and choose to just remain in the outfit that they're in. So oftentimes family members don't always recognize that one of the cognitive challenges that their loved one might be facing is they're not able to initiate an activity. Or if the directions that go along with that activity, such as brushing your teeth, there's a lot of little steps in that. If they don't know how to get it started and they need that remotivation or that encouragement, if it's not there intact in the home, they're going to lose that ability or that interest in doing it. And so I think that's really an important thing. When you look at physical decline, you also have to look at the cognitive relationship that also is declining as well. We look at incontinence and dehydration, history of falls. These are all important things because, again, they kind of all go hand in hand when you look at the fact that as someone is declining, as people are aging, they have tunnel vision. They start to lose their peripheral vision. So if someone has tunnel vision and there is, a bit of a physical disconnect in the disease process and the decline, if the message from the brain down to the legs is slower to get your loved one moving, there's a disconnect where falls can occur more often. And if somebody is getting up in the middle of the night and taking themselves to the bathroom, again, that tunnel vision, poor lighting, it can challenge them and they're more at risk for falls and injuries. And if a loved one is going to the bathroom, but they're not cognitively remembering to rehydrate, then they can also dehydrate and decline. And I do recognize that a lot. When I'm working with families at home, they do say, if I'm not there to remind my loved one to drink, they don't remember to hydrate. And that can be quite dangerous when you're talking about caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia, because it does cause some disorientation and some confusion can occur just simply from not having, the hydration that's needed. Also, we want to take a look at, again, with the physical decline, I recognize that Alzheimer's disease is kind of an illness from the neck up. And so they have challenges with speech, but they also have challenges with swallowing or with chewing. And that can be a physical decline. And it's something that, oftentimes family members may not recognize. They might tell their loved one, oh, you're eating too fast, or slow down, when apparently there could be something really going on internally with them that's causing the challenge. A couple other things that I look at as well. Sometimes they may inappropriately disrobe, and it's not that, it's done with intention. Oftentimes, if someone is uncomfortable or if their clothing is restraining them, um, sometimes family members don't recognize that, as you age, you gain weight in different places. And if they're not comfortable, that clothing might come off. Also, too, as people age, their skin gets thinner. And so they're more hypersensitive to hot, to cold, to fabrics. So some things may cause an irritant and you don't even recognize, why, because your loved one might have a challenge with verbalizing to you and saying to you, this is uncomfortable, I don't want to wear it. And that also too sometimes can be the trigger why they want to keep the same outfit on all the time. That's something that we recognize often. And it's something that, it can be navigated once we learn what the likes and the dislikes are of someone. And lastly, I think it's important that families recognize that with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, again, I'll talk briefly about ambulation, because there's a tendency to shuffle when they walk or to list to one side, maybe leaning forward or leaning backward. And again, this can contribute to an increase in falls and injuries because they've lost that connection to maintaining their physical abilities. And also, too, their perception of the world is quite different when we talk about their cognition. Oftentimes, again, with that head-heart disconnect, I'll have some family members say to me, I'm taking care of my mom and I'm always telling her what she needs to do. And she's always saying, you're so bossy, or I can do it myself. I don't need your help. And again, when you look at the cognitive decline, you have to respect and recognize that the person with dementia thinks that they're waking up and doing all the right things all day long. So their perception of real-time reality is quite different than their care partner or their caregiver. And I think that's something that oftentimes family members beat themselves up about, because they'll say, kind of an exasperated way, I've tried everything and I just can't get her to listen. And it's not that she can't listen, it's just that she's hearing you differently. And so oftentimes when we teach family members how to communicate, they see that part of their relationship does change. And that's part of that head-heart disconnect that I was talking about. Another couple things that I wanted to address just briefly is recognizing the changing needs of the caregiver. I think especially during these trying times that we're all experiencing, trying to work from home and care for a loved one in the same space, it poses a large challenge because the person with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia doesn't respect or recognize different boundaries. And so adult sons, adult daughters, even spouses, you're dealing with a lot of pressure right now, trying to take care of their loved one, but also answer the phone or be on call, I say, even in the middle of the night, if a loved one lives in a different home and that phone rings throughout the night. I always call it sleeping with one eye open. I've had, spouses say to me, I sleep in a chair and try and make sure that my loved one doesn't get up and wander around the home in the middle of the night. I've even had adult sons say, well, we're on a rotation. There's 3 sons and 1 daughter. And each one of the guys takes a turn sleeping on the hallway floor at night. And then our sister comes over in the daytime to make sure that our dad is safe. And I listen to what families are telling me that they're doing and the hoops that they're jumping through, from installing nanny cams to living their own lives by alarms. And I don't necessarily mean a physical alarm, but the take my loved one to the bathroom alarm, and there's been a reaction because there's an emergency alarm, or it's time to help my loved one get a shower or to eat or take their medication, doctor's appointments, beauty shop appointments. I call it the chronic on-call syndrome that a lot of family members face. And they do it like warriors, and they do it with a badge of honor. And Again, to me, as I view and support family members, I see their exhaustion. I see their undying devotion to their loved one and their fear of failure. And I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you today on this webinar, because I don't want people to feel like they're failing when they have to ask for help, when they have to ask for safe, supportive care. And I also want people to recognize some of the decline that their loved one, or the changing needs that their loved one is experiencing. Again, sometimes you'll hear someone with dementia say, "Are you going to put me away?" Because they have an awareness that they're making mistakes. Some people with Alzheimer's disease truly recognize that they've made mistakes, and they begin to self-isolate, or even suffer from bouts of depression, or disengaging, because they're embarrassed or they're worried that they're making too many mistakes. Again, their perception of the world is so different, and sometimes they experience anger, or denial, or just anxiousness in general, sometimes even paranoia. But again, it all stems from that inability to make choices and decisions. And oftentimes when they do make choices and decisions, they don't remember or recall that they made them. And so I think that's something it's important to recognize as well. And something else that I wanted to really kind of touch base with family members, or caregivers, is the permission for recall, recognition, and the ability to ruminate. And the reason that I say this is because when you're looking at trying to take care of your loved one in real-time reality, it's so important that you recall the past. Think about how your loved one was before the cognitive decline, before the physical challenges. What was important to them? How did they live their lives? How did they care for people in their lives? How did they protect your dignity or their parents' dignity in the past? What was important to them? And when you kind of become an investigator and allow yourself to revisit the past and remember who your loved one was and what was important to them before the decline, it helps you recognize how to navigate the space that you find yourself in now. And I'll just give you a brief example. For myself, with my loved one, I know that my mom does not ever want to be called honey or sweetie or darling, because she's always felt that that was really disrespectful. So I would never say that to her. I call her by the given name that I have for her, that she recognizes that, oh, this is my daughter talking to me. And I use her childhood nickname because that's the relationship that we have. So it's important that we recognize what's important to our loved one from the past in order to protect their dignity and help them navigate, like I said, the space that they're living in now. And just because they have a challenge with their memory does not mean that we should treat them as they are less than. They have a challenge with their memory, but that means they have not lost their cognitive abilities for emotional expressions. And they still have feelings and opinions of real-time situations. And so it's important that we ask them for input in what they think and how they feel about the situations that they find themselves in. Because like I said, decisions are hard to make, especially when you're under stress. And the reason that I talk about this is because a lot of times, and to me, this is the most important part of my portion of this webinar is, 20 years ago when I was in the field, it was very different. And when people were looking for senior living support, they were able to do it in their own time and kind of shop around and make decisions. And I'm looking at people in real-time reality now, and they are not coming until they're forced to make a decision, meaning that their loved one has suffered an emergency or a dramatic decline or some type of crisis that has now forced them to make a decision. Meaning that maybe a loved one has been sent to the hospital and, after seeing specialists and doctors and maybe a behavioralist, they find themselves so overwhelmed with so much information. And in the back of their mind, they're thinking, finances and cognition and abilities. And There's so much overwhelming stress has been placed upon them in a few short days. And then they're met by a social worker that says, well, we don't feel that your loved one is successful to be able to go at home and live as they had in the past. And so you need to find assisted living or personal care. Your loved one needs more care. And we'll be releasing them in 3 days from the hospital. And, that family is met with this overwhelming stress of, oh my gosh, what do I do? How do I make a decision? And so, again, to me, this is the most important part, because I want families to recognize that it is not a betrayal to start to look and ask questions now, so that they are prepared in the event something tragic or dramatic or unforeseen occurs, and they find themselves in this space to race to support their loved one. Because again, when I think about ruminating the future, again, it's taking the time to investigate, what does a senior living program look like? And of course, a website is wonderful. A phone call is important. Talking to friends and family and comparing notes. I'm a big believer in the word of mouth, and hearing good things that people have to say. I know during this time it's a little bit crazy trying to visit facilities, but I still think that that's an important opportunity for families to engage. And hopefully in the near future, when things get back to normal, and a physical tour is possible, I always encourage families to use all of their senses. Look at the people living in the community. Do they appear engaged? Do they appear happy? Listen to the sounds around. Is there happiness? Is there laughter? Is there music? Look at the staff. Are they engaged? Are they engaging with the resident? Even use the sense of taste and see if a meal can be offered, so that you have an opportunity to know more about the community and the programs. And again, we talk about engagement and that zest for life, that quality for life. To me, I always laugh and smile, because I've only ever worked for Country Meadows for quite a long time now. And I love when families come to visit and they're not able to find their loved one, because they are just assuming that their loved one is sitting in their bedroom waiting for them, only to find out that their loved one is in an activity or on a country ride or out to lunch even. And they realize, oh, my loved one has a life too. And it represents an opportunity. Again, for me, I feel like when families are looking for senior care support programs, they also have to think about themselves and recognize, I'm looking for a home for my loved one, and I want to feel at home when I'm there too. To me, that's a huge selling point, because it's so important to have conversations and decisions. Decisions will come after conversations are had and after relationships are starting to be built. Because when you look at it, you have to recognize that a senior living program does not just meet the needs and care for the needs of the person living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, but they also support the family as well. And in saying that, that takes me to my next point, and that is permission to grieve. And a lot of times families, they don't allow themselves or recognize that they should be able to have permission to grieve. And when I talk about that, I mean, of course, we're going to grieve the losses that and recognize the losses that the loved one is experiencing. And it's important to be able to have that mindset of, we're not going to get those days back, but we can still maintain a relationship now. I know a lot of times families will say to me, I'm afraid my mom will forget my name or she'll forget who I am. And I say to them, they never forget that emotional exchange. If they forget your name, that's one thing, but for them to be able to express, there's my person. When my person is here, they make me feel safe and loved. They make me feel I belong. And so I can say that because I am the youngest daughter of three girls who all have rhyming names. And my mom has never called me by the right name for as long as I can remember. But she knows that I love her, and she knows that she's safe when she's with me. And I think sometimes we forget that we are allowed to have permission to grieve the things we've lost, but we also need to embrace the things that we can still retain. And relationships are important parts of that. And so when I talk about the benefits of a senior living program, okay, it's not just the fact that we have a lot of knowledge for different cognitive levels of care, different physical levels of care, and we protect residents' medical safety and their physical safety. But again, I talk about those programs that stimulate cognitive and social, emotional, and kinesthetic stimulation, sensory stimulation. Those are all important key components to a dynamic senior living program. Because the way I view it, taking care of people with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, I want them to burn off as much energy as they can in the daytime so that they're able to have a quality night's sleep. I want them to have those engagements and those friendships and relationships based on that mutual trust and rapport that is built with not just each other resident, but with staff and even with visiting family members. I also want family members to recognize that we engage with them as well, and we teach them and we motivate them to fill that void of the emptiness that they may feel that they're going to start experiencing when their loved one is no longer, their care priority. And so it's important to me that family members recognize that, spouses are still spouses. Adult daughters and sons are still adult daughters and sons. Those relationships don't end. They become care partners with us. Because the only way to take care of someone living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, it's actually a four-part component. And I always say we can't do it without the families. We cannot do it without their knowledge and their insight to what works and what doesn't work with their loved one. I also believe that our floor staff, our personal care aides, our medication associates, and our nursing staff, even our maintenance directors and maintenance staff and housekeepers, they're all the eyes and ears, and they see what goes on with the residents, and they report all changes and recognize when someone's not feeling well or if somebody is having a challenge. So they need to be heard. And the management team has to bring that all together with the families, but the most important is the resident themselves. We have to learn from them their likes and their dislikes, their abilities and their interests. And we need to know from them what works for them. Even if the person, is dramatically challenged with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, we still read their body language. We're watching their facial features, and we're building that, again, rapport with them so that we can learn what works and what doesn't work so that we can provide that care. And that's how we're able to build that dignified trust. And I also say to family members, we have a massive team of people caring for the residents at Country Meadows, and we go home tired. So I give so much respect and honor to the family members that are caring for their loved ones at home. And their team is quite small. It might be a team of one or just a small few. And it's important that when choosing a retirement community for their loved ones, they recognize that they become part of our family. They become part of our resource team as well, and we become a we in order to provide that dignified care. So, like I said, just to quickly recap a few things that I talked about. Listen to your head and listen to your heart. Don't feel like you failed if you find yourself faced with challenges. Think to the future by looking to the past, and that'll help you make those decisions and help you navigate the space you find yourself in real-time reality. And like I said, make sure that you have even just a few people on your team to be part of your resources so that, there's safety and there's dignity in providing the care that you are for your loved one. Lastly, I just want people to realize that the most important thing is that I keep saying everything is the most important thing. I think it's because, to me, there's no list of what's the most important. Everything we do is a high priority. And I want families to be able to feel comfortable in the space they find themselves in. And I want families to be recognized and be heard. And again, to be part of the care team as we care for those that are living their best lives. I can't imagine what it would be like for someone to wake up every morning and be so uncertain, and just struggle. Our goal is to be many steps ahead of them physically and cognitively so that we can set them up to succeed. And again, to have that quality of life. I always quote Dame Cicely Saunders. She's the modern day founder of American Hospice. And she says, "You matter because you're you. You matter until the last moments of your breath. You matter." And I have lived by that for the last 25 years. The first time I've heard it, I was hooked. And so I'll leave you with that today. And Kelly, if there's questions that I can answer, I'd be happy to do so at this time.
Thank you, Maureen. That was a lot of information. I know our families appreciate you sharing your expertise and insight. First, we have from Kathy. She asks, how do you know when it's unsafe to care for your parent at home?
Again, it goes back to that head-heart disconnect. I always kind of ask families, like, how many hurdles are you jumping through? What is normal and what is not normal? I think oftentimes we convince ourselves, oh yeah, this is normal. This is okay that I'm sleeping on the living room floor or I'm sleeping on the hall room floor to make sure that my loved one is okay. So it's trusting your gut and really thinking to yourself, Kathy, if there was a crisis and something happened to you, how would your loved one be able to ask for help? How would your loved one be able to communicate your physical needs if you were incapacitated? I think oftentimes when I put it that way, people recognize, oh, that is unsafe. A while back, I had heard a story, and I'll share it with you. A spouse was not feeling well, and he was having a crisis, and he drove himself and his wife, who had dementia, to the hospital. And in the emergency room, they asked her to wait, and she was filled with adrenaline, so she was pretty lucid at that time, even though she had dementia. And he was actually, placed in a room, and she said, well, okay, I'm going to go out and get the car, and I'll come back tomorrow. And by the time she got to the parking lot, she forgot that she was going out to get the car. And, she was found by police hours later, walking on the streets to get back home. And I mean, that's a crisis situation for not just one, but both seniors in that case. And, that's a heartbreaking story. And fortunately, it had a safe and happy ending. But again, you have to listen to your gut. Is my loved one able to cook for themselves? Are they able to do their own laundry? Are they able to care for themselves? If the answer is no, and you're not able to have safe supportive care in the home, it might be time to start to look for safe supportive care outside of the home. Driving is another one that always, puts people on the fence. We really should take the keys, but we're afraid. We're afraid of how they'll react. When you think about it, adult children, are they afraid of the memories of how mom and dad reacted in the past? Or are they afraid of how the senior citizen with the challenge is acting? So sometimes we think from our head and our heart from the past instead of our head and heart in real time.
What about if we're caring for a loved one with dementia in our home? So that loved one is with us and we can provide the meals and the general day-to-day care. And don't have to worry so much, can the loved one cook for themselves? Can they do these, can they dry themselves, et cetera, because the caregiver is doing that at home. What are some signs for, in those cases, the caregivers to note that it may no longer be safe for them to care for that loved one at home?
Well, there's a lot of things. Again, I had talked about falls and injuries. If it's, you're caring for a loved one at home and the caregiver, the care partner is not able to get them up, lift them up, or the caregiver is starting to injure themselves, that's a challenge, that's a problem. If the caregiver is starting to lose patience because the person that they're caring for, their loved one with dementia, is doing a form of wandering that's quite extreme called shadowing or trailing, where they're constantly attached to them. Where do I go? What do I do? What's next? If that anxiety level is building, if they're able to care for and meet the needs of their loved one with med management and meals and safety, that's one thing. But if you're starting to notice behavioral decline, aggression, agitation, physical wandering away from the home, in some cases it's sad, there's violence in the home, these would be, to me, opportunities for a loved one to first seek medical assistance and guidance. And once meds are under control, then maybe seeking alternative care outside of the home.
Do you recommend that people start maybe considering and just looking at options that are available to them close to their homes or the location in which they'd like their loved one to reside?
I think that's extremely important. To me, knowledge is power. The more you know, the better you do. I think it's important for families to not be embarrassed or ashamed of this diagnosis. I think that it's important that any family that is, witnessing this webinar, there's no shame in calling your local hospitals and saying, do you have a Jerry Psych program? Do you have a program that if my loved one has a catastrophic reaction, that they can be, monitored for a time, and can we take a look at their medication safely? I think a lot of times as soon as you say the word Jerry Psych, people start to get nervous or ashamed or embarrassed or think that, it's taboo. And that's not the case. Sometimes I think it's important that people realize that with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, oftentimes they're not able to tell us, oh, this medication makes me feel strange, or this isn't working for me. I'm not a nurse or a medical professional in regards to being a doctor, but I do know that sometimes it's important that we always remember medication and dosage has to be right, has to be proper, or you're going to see, some adverse effects. And like I said, I think a lot of times people with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia can be hypersensitive to the medications that they're on. And that can cause a challenge. So I think it's important to have the dialogue with the doctor, have ask questions to local hospitals. And I think it's important to investigate senior living communities in your area and not just accepting one that's close to home because it's convenient for you. You really want to investigate what that program looks like, what those day-to-day dynamics of senior living and support really look like.
As we received questions prior to this webinar, we have a lot of people who are in varied stages of the journey with caring for someone with Alzheimer's and dementia. Joseph asks, my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. What can I expect from my relationship with him now?
I think it's important that, again, we realize that the here and now is so important. And I am who they need me to be in the moments that they need me. It never should be a priority to use reality orientation to bring somebody to real time. So in his case, I would definitely, if he calls him dad, I would always call him dad. And you said his name is Joe, is that
Yes.
correct?
Mhm.
I would say every time I would engage, I would say, "Hi dad, it's me, Joe, your favorite son." It's a nice way to state the relationship and also put kind of like a tender spin into the conversation. So I think that's always important, that the parent never forgets that they are the parent. I always say, once the mother, always the mother. Once the dad, always the dad. Just because age or cognitive decline has changed, that doesn't change the relationship. I remember once, years and years and years ago, I had a female resident who was on hospice, and she was actively dying, and her daughter was just sobbing and sitting bedside. And I said to her, "I really feel like you need a hug." And she said, "All I want to do is hug my mom." And I said, "Why are you waiting for permission?" I said, "Just climb in that bed with her." And she was like, "Can I?" I was like, "She's your mom." It's okay. It's okay if your mom sees you cry. You're her daughter. You're her child. I think oftentimes adult sons and daughters think they have to have this brave face, and they don't. They're still their child. And it's okay to laugh. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be brave and strong. It's okay to be humorous, and just remember, we're not promised tomorrow. And so having that relationship in the day-to-day allows you to push back the things that really aren't important. You realize, hey, I don't have to be right about everything. I don't have to correct my loved one. This is how they feel in this moment, so I'm just going to go with it.
Ruth Ann has a good one here. She says that, what if I am recognizing signs that my loved one is declining? What do I do now?
This is the scariest thing. It's like you're standing on the ledge going, that's a pretty steep step. Should I try and walk off? I always say, when you come from a place of love, it doesn't have to be scary, So I teach family members that that's where you want to go. You want to sit down with your loved one and say, I'm a little scared and I'm worried and I want to talk. I'm coming out of a place of love. I've seen a few things and I don't understand. And I want to make sure that you're okay. I'm worried. I noticed the car has a lot of dents on it. It might be that conversation. Or when was the last time, we went to the doctor and had a physical? I really love you and I want you to be here forever. And I want to make sure that you're safe. Can I please go to the doctor with you? Just to make sure that you're okay. I think when you come from a place of love and you ask permission, like I said earlier about that 4-part component to care, that person with dementia has to have a say. And now say her mom says, "I don't want you to go to the doctor with me," or "How dare you ask me that," or "You don't know what you're talking about." And that's when you can say, "I know you hate this. I hate it too, but I don't want you to be alone in this." I always tell families, when you don't know what to say, state what you see. If your loved one is yelling at you and they're mad, you want to say that. I can hear it in your voice. You're really angry with me. Did I disappoint you? Or you have tears. Mom, you're sad. What happened? It's not about cheering them up or changing the way they feel. It's about going with them and acknowledging the way they feel and allowing them to feel it and letting them know that you feel it too. Oftentimes I'll say to families, it's okay to agree with them. Yeah, I hate this too. I wish that we didn't have to, move. The doctor doesn't feel that it's a good idea for you to be at home anymore. I hate this too, but we're going to make the best of it together. And then that way they know that you're on their side and you're not trying to negate the way they feel or change the way they feel, or do a song and dance or sugarcoat the message. You've got to be honest with your feelings and with yourself as well.
What are some tips for the caregiver to cope with that guilt that he or she may feel about what you said with the head and heart disconnect, that, I promised mom that I would never put her in a retirement community. It sounds so hard, but realistically, you need to do that for your mother to be safe. I mean, how can someone cope with those guilt feelings?
On every campus at Country Meadows, we have a designated program manager or coordinator that is affiliated with the Alzheimer's Association. So we run a support group through the Alzheimer's Association. I know a lot of those colleagues of mine, especially with our Country Meadows family members, they don't even wait for the support group. They just go in and talk one-on-one and kind of have their own personal support group, which is fantastic. A lot of times you need to have someone to talk to process that and realize that you're not alone and you're not wrong for doing what you did or feeling the way you feel. I've even had family members come to me and say that they've put themselves in contact with, a psychiatrist or psychologist or a counselor, just to have someone to, for lack of a better terms, projectile vomit all their stress on. We all need someone to be our capable, trusted, caring listener, and to listen without judgment, because we never know when we're going to need somebody to listen to us. And again, each person's journey is so different. We can't judge our family members for the decisions that they've made or for the actions that they've taken. The most important thing we can do is support those relationships and help them stay connected to their loved ones so that they don't feel lost in all of this. No one should feel alone in this. It's a very isolating disease. And so no one, from the person who's living with the illness to their family members, care partners, caregivers, to the staff that we care for, no one should feel alone in providing care and support. And that's why it takes a community to be able to provide that.
We have so many questions. We only have time for a couple of more. Mary asks, what one piece of advice would you give someone who's considering memory care for their loved one?
Prepare yourself to fall in love with every resident in the program. They just have such a purity to them and such an honesty to them. I see family members every day forgetting almost that the people that they're spending time with are not their loved ones. They just kind of, rally the troops and bring them all in. And I think once you realize that people are coming out of a place of love, it expands your heart even more. And so I think a lot of times family members are afraid. I don't want to send my loved one to the memory support program. I don't want my loved one, to be locked up. Well, they're not locked up. It's a secured environment to protect their judgments because they've lost the judgment for wandering, or they've lost the judgment for safety and security. And so a secured program enables that person to live their quality life in a manner that is molded and shaped and monitored for their success. So the families should not be afraid of a secured memory support program, but they should expect to fall in love, because they really will.
One thing that I love to see is all of the programming and the happy, engaged residents, and they're going on outings, they're going on country rides, they're enjoying taking care of building pets and playing games and things like that. How are you addressing keeping residents with memory support challenges? How are you addressing keeping them engaged during these times of the COVID pandemic, when we sometimes find that we need to isolate or quarantine people for safety purposes? How are you still delivering those services to keep them engaged?
The most important thing is to keep our residents safe. And that starts first with the staff. We recognize that none of our residents are sick because none of them have exposure, to the outside world at that time. So we knew that they weren't going to make us sick. So we took the responsibility to making sure that we took care of ourselves. The staff took care of ourselves. We didn't take any additional risks, and we really kind of stepped up so that we were protecting them, always wearing our PPE, but also taking those opportunities to do the best that we could to have them stay in their rooms. And then you remember they have dementia. They're not going to stay in their rooms. They're going to still come out. So when we could keep them in their rooms, we would go in and spend time with them, numerous different coworkers every single day, so that they didn't feel alone. But again, now as things have begun to loosen up, we are meeting in small groups. They're socially distanced. If residents are doing a painting program, they're wearing the gloves, they're wearing PPE just like we are. If they're playing a ball game or they're doing something, they're wearing gloves. And everything is always sanitized. At first, we were worried that they were going to be afraid of us because of the masks and the goggles and the headsets and stuff and the gowns, but they weren't. They saw straight through it. And they would look at us and go like, "Why are you wearing that? What's wrong with you today?" So a lot of it has turned into a bit of a sense of humor with them. But again, engaging one-on-one, we do a lot of that, and meeting in small groups but socially distanced, and it's been working with no challenges actually on our end.
Thanks, Maureen. That was a lot of information that I'm sure our viewers will find extremely useful. Do you have any additional questions that we didn't address today? Well, this does not have to be the end of your educational journey. Simply reach out to us via email at asktheexperts@countrymeadows.com or asktheexperts@ecumenicalretirement.org. Feel free to ask your questions or even share some ideas for future topics that you would like us to consider sharing in a webinar. And thank you to our viewers for joining us. Remember, we're here to help. We're here to help you. Have a great day.